It's a further criminalization of land defenders.
Tonight, injunctions extended. What the latest court ruling means for the land back occupation.
At first, I reached out to try to find out why.
She was hailed as a trailblazer. Now, an Indigenous pilot is trying to find out why Manitoba Justice has denied her a job.
If we start investing them at an age now, how do we expect them to succeed later on in life?
And the Little Stars of Tomorrow help break ground on their new childcare center. Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Brittany Hobson. Today, the Ontario Superior Court ruled in favor extending a pair of court orders in Caledonia, Ontario against Six Nations land defenders. The defenders began occupying a residential development construction site on what they say is unceded lands earlier this month. Jamie Pashagumskum was at the courthouse in Brantford and brings us this.
We don't get it!
Dozens of Six Nations residents and allies gathered at the courthouse in opposition to the injunctions. Justice R. John Harper had previously granted temporary injunctions to Foxgate Developments and Haldimand County in an effort to end the occupation of Foxgate's Mackenzie's Meadows construction site and the road blockade that went up in recent weeks. Today, Foxgate's lawyer singled out Six Nations member Schuyler Williams as a quote-unquote leader in the Haudenosaunee land defense. Williams is now named a defendant in the case, meaning he is potentially on the hook for massive legal bills. After the hearing, Williams said the justice system is stacked against the Haudenosaunee.
Extending the injunction indefinitely is ridiculous, and it's a further criminalization of land defenders.
During the hearing, a Haudenosaunee woman named Jacqueline House tried to read a statement on behalf of women from Six Nations, but Justice Harper prohibited her, saying House had not properly registered to speak in court today.
I don't understand their system. I don't understand what junctions mean, what junctions are about. I don't understand why they use the word Jane Doe and John Doe. I don't understand none of that stuff, and yet they're sitting here saying that, oh, well, you guys are criminalized. Criminalized for what?
She says they are standing up for their inherent rights as Haudenosaunee.
If that's wrong, then the whole justice system is wrong.
She says the women are protectors of the land and need to be heard. Williams says denying Six Nations women's a voice wasn't right, and the courts don't respect Indigenous law.
We've had this injunction here now for about a month, and so it's just kind of further escalating the pressure on the OPP to enforce, violent action against our people.
Since Williams has been named a defendant, Justice Harper will now set a new date so Williams' lawyer can prepare submissions. A lawyer for the Ontario Provincial Police said today the force is relying on its liaison team to broker a peaceful resolution. If that fails, the lawyer told Justice Harper the OPP will then move to enforce the injunction. In the meantime, Williams says land defenders will continue to hold the 1492 Land Back Lane camp in a peaceful way. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Caledonia.
Robin Shaleka made Manitoba history when she became part of the province's first female Indigenous medevac team in 2018. Now, she says she was denied a job flying for Manitoba courts because she has distant contacts who have criminal records. Daryl Stranger has more on that story.
A bucket list. I really wanted to fly.
Robin Shaleka has been a pilot for over 10 years. She has primarily flown for airline companies in the north, and for the last 2 years she's been mostly flying medevacs, although her schedule keeps her away from her family. She applied for a job that would have seen her fly lawyers, prisoners, and judges to and from court and be home every night. Shaleka was denied the job despite passing multiple background checks and flying for court parties in the past.
Because at first, I reached out to try to find out why. Is there something I can do? Is there something I did wrong? What do you need me to do to get this contract? Because this contract meant Monday to Friday being at home every night, being there for my kids. And that's kind of critical for me right now, especially with the baby still having health problems. When I reached out, they sent an email stating that employees were not allowed to call about the results.
Manitoba Justice gave no reason for the denial, but asked if she knew anyone with a criminal history. She admitted a brother spent time in prison, and she has some contacts on Facebook who have criminal records. But she believes living in Thompson, which has some of the highest crime rates in Canada, it's hard to not know someone with a criminal past.
If you live in a small community up north, or if you're Indigenous, and you're going to have unfortunately, these ties or connections that you didn't ask for, or you don't really ask for. You know, you could practically live under a rock, but Thompson's such a small city that people become familiar. And they'd asked me, too, if I'd flown people that I knew as prisoners, and I said yes, because I'm from a small town. Anyone from that small town who is arrested that needs to be transported, I will fly them. And it's never been an issue before.
APTN reached out to Manitoba's Justice Minister Cliff Cullen, who provided the following emailed statement. Quote, to help ensure the safety and security of our provincial justice system, Manitoba Justice has a security screening process in place, and we have confidence in this process. The Civil Service Commission, which handles human resource and labor relations management in government, also provided an emailed statement to APTN. Quote, Manitoba Justice conducts its own security screenings. The security screening process involves a number of security-related checks to ensure that the applicant is acceptable for the particular role they are applying for within the department. Shaleka says she was still offered a job flying medevacs in the north, but would be away from her family. But with a young child, she doesn't know yet if she will accept the offer. She hopes her story will spark a discussion around the severity around background checks.
I really don't think it'll necessarily help my case as much. But I'm really hoping that, it kind of puts it out there for them to realize that maybe they're being a little bit too expensive, and maybe they should be giving people opportunities. There's no reason not to, especially if you are able to successfully pass all these checks.
Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
We want to hear what you think. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. Also, you can follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. British Columbia has recorded its deadliest month ever for fentanyl use. The province's chief coroner gave a grim update today on the toll illicit drugs is taking on the province. Lisa Lapointe says the number of people dying in BC continues to surpass deaths from homicide, motor vehicle accidents, suicides, and COVID-19 combined.
July 2020, there were 175 suspected illicit drug toxicity deaths. This represents a 136% increase over the number of deaths in July 2019, and is the fifth consecutive month in which British Columbia has experienced more than 100 deaths as a result of toxic illicit drugs.
Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says the numbers show that the province's overdose crisis has been made worse by the COVID-19 crisis, and she urges anyone who is concerned about a loved one to reach out before it's too late. Time for a quick break. Coming up, new federal funding to address mental health issues for Indigenous peoples during the pandemic. Here is Wednesday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. 21 above in Halifax, 19 in Fredericton, 8 degrees in Nain, 15 and some rain in Happy Valley Goose Bay, 17 above in Quebec City, 20 degrees in Montreal, 24 and some sun in Peterborough, 27 and rain in London, 20 degrees in Wawa, 19 above in Thunder Bay, in northern Manitoba, 13 degrees in Churchill, 17 and rain in God's Lake, 26 in Gimli, some sun and cloud, and 29 in Brandon, 28 above in Regina, 28 and rain in Swift Current, 21 in L'Orange, a sunny 21 degrees in Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller appeared at today's COVID health briefing. He said that stress and anxiety levels have gone up during the pandemic. With that in mind, Miller announced a boost to funding for Indigenous mental health supports. APTN's Todd Lamarand has more.
Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller used the Hope for Wellness helpline to demonstrate the stress caused by COVID-19. In January to April 2019, it received just over 3,600 calls from people in crisis.
For this same period in 2020, there were over 10,000 calls and chats.
In response, Miller announced $82.5 million in funding. It's for virtual counseling, improving access to addictions treatment, and expanding community-based health supports. Miller defended the amount.
We'll stand ready for additional support, but I think this is an amount that will bolster the current amounts that are being deployed into community, and then we're working with communities to help them face what is an increasing and in fact that we haven't fully measured second pandemic with respect to mental health in communities.
Indigenous Services Chief Medical Officer Dr. Tom Wong said the pandemic has made worse the effects of residential schools and colonization, and improving mental health is a permanent goal.
Trauma like that, you do not resolve that one single day, one single month, one single year. And so the support that we stand behind First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, is the support for long term.
Miller also fielded a question about First Nation schools in Ontario. The Anishinaabe Nation says Ottawa has ignored requests for more funding and supplies to reopen schools next month. Miller said requests for funding should go to regional directors.
We will be there to help, whether it's issues with respect to hand sanitizers, retrofitting, ensuring that everyone has all the proper guidelines. And I'll stress to say that the provincial guidelines that have been circulated are a minimum, and we will be there to assist them in the needs that they have.
Miller also praised First Nations leaders for completely flattening the curve of new COVID infections. Todd Lamourant, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The Deputy Grand Chief of Anishinaabe Nation, which represents 49 First Nations in Northern Ontario, says leaders and parents are worried about the return to school next month. Derek Fox says the Government of Canada has all but ignored urgent requests to provide resources and supplies that would allow students to return to school in a safe environment in September. For more, we're joined by Deputy Grand Chief Derek Fox. Thank you for joining us today, Deputy Grand Chief Fox. We'll get right into it. What are some of the concerns you're hearing about the planned return to school?
Well, we're in Northern Ontario, Anishinaabe Nation. We have 49 First Nations. 32 of those are remote fly-in communities, and come September 8th, we have not got any kind of response from the federal government with respect to the return of our students. So we have submitted a $33 million plan, a well-thought-out plan that was provided input from our First Nations leadership, our educators, and many of our students and parents and education leaders throughout the NAN territory. So we had, if you break that down, that's $33 million divided by 9,000 students in the NAN territory, and that's roughly $3,600 per student. So that is not a lot of money when you come down, when you think about the cost of PPE gear, flying PPE gear up there, the added cost of the remoteness cost. So you're looking at $3,600 per student, but unfortunately we have got zero response from the federal government.
So more on that, like what type of resources and supplies are needed for NAN communities to deliver education to the nearly 9,000 elementary and secondary students?
Well, we need what everybody else needs. So you've heard in the province, they're in the province of Ontario, they're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to the school boards and schools to ensure that they have the PPE gear, the sanitization supplies. The school buses will need to be sanitized. The schools will need to be sanitized. There's going to be additional costs for mental health support, nurses, additional teachers. Even a simple thing as a mask. If you're buying a mask in one of our communities, that mask is going to add, you're going to add a couple dollars to the cost of that mask just for the sake of getting it up there and flying it up there through the increased freight costs and remoteness costs to get them up there. So we need just your basic cleaning, sanitary supplies, and currently the NAN First Nations will be having to go into their own funds that are there for education, but funds that were given pre-COVID. So they have funds there, but they're going to go into a bigger deficit having to use those funds.
Earlier today, we did hear from Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller, and he was asked about the concerns that you guys have expressed. He says the federal government will be there to help. Are you happy with that response?
I am not happy with that response. They only said they will be here to help because we've made these media splashes, which started last Friday. And you know what? I'm hopeful that they will be there, but up to this point, they have not been here at all. We submitted this plan over 2 months ago. They've had plenty of time to get this work done. They've had plenty of time to ensure that the supplies could be here, that we have the support to ensure that our students could start on September 8th. And up to this point, they have done nothing. So I'll believe that when I see the action.
September is upon us. There's only a week or two left before the start of classes. Are there schools looking at delaying the return date?
Yes, we have currently 2 high schools. We have Dennis Franklin Carmody High School and Pelican Falls High School, secondary students who cannot start come September 8th. They fly out to these schools. They're located in Thunder Bay, just outside of Sewickley. And they're hoping to start in the second quadmester, October 28th. So the reason being they have not received the financial support, and our school board, NNEC, cannot provide or ensure the safety of their students due to the fact that they have not received any support or funding. In the NAN territory, in the remote north, we have roughly 40 to 50 schools. The jurisdiction lies with those communities and those schools. They're going to decide what they're going to do. I have heard that some schools will open, but once again, they will be relying on the education funds that are there for them that were there pre-COVID through those agreements. But currently, they're just going to go into a bigger deficit, and they're not going to be enough funds to cover the amount of PPE, sanitary supplies that are needed to ensure that our students are safe when they return to school.
So we've already seen this, the pandemic, already disrupted the end of last school year, and we're looking at possibly delaying this year. I mean, are there concerns with this new school year being put off?
There are always concerns that school will be put off, that school will be delayed. As I said earlier, the 2 high schools are already delayed until October. There is concerns that schools will be delayed until further into the school year. So obviously, you're balancing the safety of the community members in which those schools and students are, and you're balancing the risk of COVID spreading with the education of our students. And our students, just like all the students throughout the country, throughout the cities, our provinces, they're enduring the same mental health issues. They all want to go back to school. They're excited to see their friends. Unfortunately, our kids are facing discrimination. They're being looked at like an afterthought. And frankly, up until this point, the federal government just doesn't seem to care about these students and our children in the far north.
Well, thank you. That's all the time that we have for today. I want to thank you again for joining us.
Thank you for your time.
The Manitoba Métis Federation helps fund a new child care centre in Winnipeg. More on that after the break. Here's the rest of Wednesday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. 21 in sun in Fort McMurray, 20 degrees in Grand Prairie. Sunny skies and 24 in Calgary, 29 in Medicine Hat. Over to the west coast, 28 degrees in Penticton and Kamloops. 16 in rain in Smithers, 18 above in Prince George. In the Yukon, 17 degrees in Whitehorse, 16 in Mayo. Over to the NWT, rain and 16 in Yellowknife, 17 in Watee. 18 above in Colville Lake, 14 degrees in Fort McPherson. Over to Nunavut, 13 and some sun in Chesterfield, 12 above in Repulse Bay. 8 degrees in Clyde River, 7 in Cape Dorset. Children from Winnipeg's North End broke ground this afternoon on a new childcare centre. The centre is a partnership between Little Stars Playhouse and the Manitoba Métis Federation. Michelle Carlenzig was there as the shovels hit the ground and has more in this report.
Yay! Oh my goodness!
Shovels were given to the children of Winnipeg's North End this afternoon to break ground where a new childcare centre will sit. Little Stars Playhouse is a partnership with multiple stakeholders in Manitoba and will be home to the North End Stay and Play program. Manitoba Métis Federation donated $750,000 to the project to match the federal government contributions. MMF President David Chartrand said the federal funding would have been pulled without MMF's help. He spoke of the importance to keep the money invested in youth.
Without the nation-to-nation government relationship we have, I wouldn't have the ability to have the amount of resources I have behind me to invest in matters of this nature. For example, Canada is putting $900,000 into the project. MMF will be putting about $750,000 to make this real. So we're making sure this project is going to happen, that the shovel will go in the ground, and this beautiful building will be erected. Our investment is to the children. That's the next leaders of tomorrow. But we will start investing them at an age now. How do we expect them to succeed later on in life?
The event hosted traditional Métis dancers and music while the community celebrated. Kevin Lamoureux, the Liberal MP for Winnipeg's North, spoke on federal support.
When we think in terms of here in the North End, the demand is very high. And the type of importance of having a cultural sensitivity to, in particular, the North End needs is critically important. I understand that the total contribution is going to be just under $1 million coming from Ottawa, and we think that that's going to go a long way in terms of assisting what is a fantastic idea that's going to help so many children.
The centre will be available for early years from newborns up to age 5 during the days and offer music programs in the evening. MMF has committed $9 million this year for Métis culturally specific childcare initiatives in Manitoba. Michelle Carlenzig, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
And that's your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For more Indigenous news, visit aptnnews.ca or on Facebook and Twitter at APTN News. We leave you tonight with some of the sights and sounds from today's Little Stars Playhouse groundbreaking. I'm Brittany Hobson. Have a great evening.